All right, let's get right into it. When we talk about billionaires, you know how it is. Things get intense. But what if we're not even having the right debate? What if the real question isn't how much money someone has, but how they actually made it? This whole explainer is going to break down that one crucial difference. The difference between the people who build a bigger economic pie for everyone and those who are just really, really good at taking a bigger slice for themselves.
And this quote from the source material, it really sets the tone for everything we're about to cover. The argument here isn't some kind of attack on success. Not at all. It's about taking a hard look at the systems that let wealth be siphoned off instead of actually being created. It's a conversation about fairness, not just about fortune.
So this leads us to the central idea, this framework of the builder versus the taker. Think of it like this. A builder creates something new, a product or a service that you can choose to buy. They compete out in the open. And when they win, hey, the whole economy grows a little bit. But the taker, they play a totally different game. They don't win by outcompeting you in the marketplace. No, they win by going to the rule makers, by using their massive resources to actually rewrite the rules of the game to favor them.
Okay, so if the taker's whole strategy is to rewrite the rules, how do they actually pull that off? Well, it usually doesn't start with a congressman or a new law. It starts with something way more powerful and way more subtle, controlling the entire conversation. It all boils down to this concept from way back in communication research called agenda setting. The idea is simple. When you own the microphone, the news channels, the websites, the major platforms, you don't have to bother telling people what to think. All you have to do is control what they think about. You set the agenda.
And that right there is the real power. Because if you get to decide which stories are front-page news, you also get to decide which stories never see the light of day. When you can control a nation's attention, you are, in a very real way, controlling its reality. I mean, you can't get angry about problems you never even hear about, right?
And of course, this influence spills right over into the political world. The whole idea of a democracy is supposed to be one person, one vote. Simple. But when huge amounts of wealth start flooding the system, the source material argues that it morphs into something more like $1, one vote. It's a system where financial power can just completely overwhelm the voice of an ordinary citizen.
Now, look, this isn't just a hunch or a conspiracy theory. There's data. A major political science study analyzed almost 1,800 different U.S. policy decisions, and the conclusion? It was stunning. It found that economic elites and organized business groups had a huge impact on which policies passed, while the preferences of the average American citizen had a statistically insignificant, near zero impact. Let that sink in. So, if the game is rigged, who actually ends up footing the bill? Well, as you can probably guess, the costs show up right in our bank accounts.
One of the biggest drains on our wallets comes from monopolies. True capitalism is supposed to be all about competition. May the best idea win. But when a taker uses their influence to crush or buy out all the competition, you get the exact opposite. Prices creep up, the quality of service goes down, and new ideas just stop happening. It's not about building anymore. It's just about collecting tolls.
And then you've got the tax system. Let's just look at this super simple example. Say you're an employee. You earn $100. Bam! Taxes are taken out right away, before you even see it. But if you're a person whose wealth just grows, say in stocks, that $100 in growth isn't taxed at all. It can be reinvested, and it just keeps growing. The taxes only get paid way, way down the line, if ever. You end up with two completely different sets of rules for earning and for owning.
And all of this stuff just compounds. For most of us, it creates that feeling that everything is getting more expensive all at once. Rents are going up, every single thing is a subscription now, interest payments are higher, even groceries cost more. It's that treadmill feeling of working harder and harder, but just not getting ahead, because the finish line keeps moving away from you.
You know, this kind of economic split does more than just cause financial headaches. Over time, it starts to tear the very fabric of society in two.
And here's a really fascinating idea. Maybe the greatest luxury that money can buy isn't a yacht or a jet. It's distance. Distance from the consequences of everyday problems. Distance from a struggling school system or a crumbling healthcare infrastructure or a polluted environment. When you're that shielded from the problems, it becomes almost impossible to even understand, let alone care about, the struggles that most people face every day. And that distance, it has life and death consequences. I'm being literal here. Research from economist Raj Chetty and his team found a huge, and I mean huge, gap in life expectancy between the richest 1% and the poorest 1% of Americans. This chart just lays it out so clearly. Wealth doesn't just buy you a more comfortable life, it literally buys you more life.
And the scale of impact just becomes completely different. The source material has this brilliant, sharp comparison. When a normal person has a midlife crisis, they might buy a sports car or take up pottery. When a billionaire has a midlife crisis, they might decide to fund an entire political ideology and try to reshape the country. The blast radius of their personal choices is just astronomical.
And this is where it all gets locked in, through inheritance. I mean, look at this OECD data. It can take 4 or 5 generations, that's over a century, for a low-income family to climb up to just the average income level. When that's the reality, the whole idea of meritocracy starts to feel like a joke. It feels less like a fair market and a lot more like an old-fashioned aristocracy, where the family you're born into decides your fate.
So, where is all this headed? If you follow these trends out to their logical conclusion, the source material paints a pretty bleak, almost science fiction-like picture of what's to come.
To really get this, we have to understand a key economic term: externalities. It sounds complicated, but it's not. Externalities are just the costs that a business creates but doesn't have to pay for itself. Instead, it pushes those costs onto the rest of us. Think about industrial pollution, or the mental health effects of addictive social media, or just widespread employee burnout. A taker can become fantastically wealthy by making the planet less healthy and its people more anxious, because none of those costs ever show up on their spreadsheets.
And that leads to this truly chilling final projection. The idea is that with coming breakthroughs in biotechnology and AI, the gap between the rich and poor could stop being just economic and actually become biological. The super wealthy could afford genetic enhancements, life extension treatments, things that make them literally a different kind of human. They would retreat into a proverbial citadel, a protected, enhanced class, completely separate from the rest of humanity. Which leaves us all with one final, really fundamental question to think about. The drive to build and succeed is one of the most powerful forces for human progress. But at what point does it change? At what point does the goal stop being about building a better life for yourself and start being about building a fortress just to leave everyone else behind?